I've worked on climate and energy here since about 2009 on and off. And as an engineer, I guess I'm frustrated that scientists are not giving us more options to solve climate change. Because while we can start the war on climate change to a limited effect with stuff we have today, to win this, we're really going to need new technology, and I'm counting on scientists. So one of the big challenges is how do we fund scientific breakthroughs to solving climate change at scale, but in today's historically low funding levels? So many people think of solving climate change as addressing things they can see directly in front of them, but really climate change is a planetary scale thing. We've listened to what the scientists say, many of us, and so we can see the numbers changing, we believe it's happening. But if we listen to what scientists say that we should be doing about climate change, they operate at a completely different level than most of the common messages that are out there. They're talking about radiative forcing to reject more sunlight into space. They're talking about carbon sequestration at a massive scale involving biology. And they're talking about energy growth and transformation that involves a lot of nuclear energy. So just a couple of quick numbers here. At radiative forcing, about 3 watts per meter squared, and thank you, Dave, for correcting me on that one in the past, is really what it would take to get temperatures into a more manageable region during the time that we figure out all the other things that need to happen. Because we will see increases in CO2 levels, we will see weather extremes, and this type of activity is the most obvious thing that can be done, and it's economically aligned with the interests of the countries that it affects the most. Another one is futuristic carbon sequestration. We talk about mechanical approaches to this, but they rely on industry to build, and they rely on energy infrastructure to run. That's actually quite difficult. If we look to nature in the past, nature has done this with biology, pulling down CO2 levels from around, 900 to 1,000 in the Carboniferous era to below 250. With some help, nature could do this again. The target is about 20 gigatons per year, plus or minus if we're lucky, and we need to pull down about 1,000 or 1,500 gigatons of CO2. People are reticent about paying for carbon tax on what they emit today. People are likely to be even more reticent about paying for all the CO2 that's been emitted before they were even involved with emitting CO2 in the first place, particularly if those people were in other countries. So biology is great because it just works all across the board. And 1,000 gigatons of carbonaceous material deposited at the bottom of the oceans is roughly just over a millimeter thick. So at a biological planetary scale, this doesn't seem like such a huge deal. And the last, futuristic energy. So 20 terawatts is kind of the minimum amount of energy that we really need to bring online for humanity. And assuming we want humanity to prosper, we need to go way beyond 20 terawatts. And fusion, fission, and other nuclear processes are basically the root of all energy that we rely on. So getting higher up in that food chain and getting dominance there allows us to get closer to more energy. Since 2009, worked on a number of projects here. These are 4 areas that I found are really important to creating new technologies and advancing science. I'm going to focus on creative funding because this graph is really tragic, right? We saw a lot of innovation coming out of Bell Labs, a lot of interesting stuff from NASA going to the moon. That was at the high peaks, up there in the 7 to 8%. And since then, it's just gone downhill. And we are we are more at need now of fundamental discovery-oriented science than we were before. So we need to get creative with funding. The good news is that donors and philanthropic organizations have the resources to jump science. This is providing funding in those early times of experimenting and doing things that the regular scientific funding mechanisms don't do, pushing it to maturity to the point where it can be funded in the mainstream science. So, for example, we have things that as organizations that fund science, we're used to connecting science to achieving goals, but we need to do this to achieve goals in philanthropy. We need to use the language that they can understand. We need to connect with their legacy interests as well. Program management is not something that comes naturally to most family offices and stuff, right? Running scientific programs. There is essentially a new type of specialization or third organization that can take on that and manage these so that we have good tailored research proposals, not random RFPs. We have good due diligence, and we have funding that's consistent with PhD cycles and academic learning cycles. So there are some vibrant communities that are evolving. Energy Futures Initiative, Dave Lucille Packard, Silver Lining, Prime Coalition, X Prize. Some of you probably work in some of these places, and it's great. Connecting this pool of money to more discovery-oriented science in these interesting areas that could really benefit climate change could make all the difference in the world. So there's an interesting gap between where we are today and about, let's say, 2050, 2075, when we would like to see all these things coming online. That's our careers. So what can you do to make this happen? How can we fund that scientific research? So thank you so much. And this is an excerpt from my APS 21 talk on Let's Be an Awesome Futures Past. So if you're lucky, you can click this link and look at it. Thank you.